recording just so I don't forget. Because
I'm glad we didn't get that stuff.
That would be something I would forget, would be to forget the recording. But again, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We'll let people trickle in next couple minutes, and then we'll get started. Again, obviously feel free to use the chat, drop any questions, comments, things that you might want us to talk about or answer on today's panel discussion. And I'll make sure I do my part in monitoring that chat along the way. And obviously so thankful to have Kimberly here to help moderate the conversation. So a couple minutes and then we'll do intros and dive right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Parker. I know we have a couple more that are joining us right now.
Yep.
And then what I can do is, Parker, if you want to kick us off, and then I can take it over from there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, if we're ready to get started, let's dive in. And obviously people will be trickling in, I'm sure, as we kind of kick off. But hey, everyone, once again, thanks so much for attending this month's webinar. Super excited to have this discussion with Kimberly, Paul, and Elizabeth, and let them do their introductions. But I'm Parker Pell, one of the co-founders of the company Scholars. Our entire mission is to help early career recruiting teams deliver personalized candidate experiences that transform their candidate engagement and retention strategies from the beginning. Hence why we're hosting this webinar called Defining Early Career Candidate Experience with my lovely panelists. And so I will kick it to Kimberly to kick things off and help moderate the conversation. But if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring it along the way. And yeah, super excited.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks, Parker, for even inviting myself and these others to just be a part of this conversation, which is, I think, near and dear to a lot of our hearts, which is likely why you're even attending this in the first place, because really understanding and defining what the experience is.
Oh my God, it just cut out. Oh my God.
Line too, who are, either going through these motions right now and or have shared experiences and what they've tested, tried, and learned. So we really hope that in this session, you get a lot of our golden nuggets in terms of what's working, what's not working. And then also really think about how you can redefine and find even efficiencies as you're building and growing your candidate experience. So as Parker mentioned, my name is Kimberly Taylor. I'm currently iCIMS Chief Evangelist, which really just means that I help customers build strategic plans in thinking about their end-to-end connected journey. My passion, though, is in supporting customers and really building community, which is, I think, why Parker and I have aligned so well in the past few months. Just really kind of kindred spirits and building connection and really helping to work with partners and understanding where challenges are, and then how we can use technology to better define and advance what you're doing in the marketplace. I've been in recruitment marketing for about 10 plus years and have a similar background in that I was formerly a member of a startup company and then have just moved on and continued to work with big companies in building their strategy. I feel really honored that I'm joined by Paul and Elizabeth, who both have deep and rich experience all across the board. I'm going to let them actually introduce themselves before we get into this conversation today. But again, the intent of today is to have a really engaged discussion where you are dropping in the chat and aligning with who you are, what you do, and how we can help you as well in throwing out references and strategies to what's working. If any of this sounds like, yes, I want to jump in right now, please feel free to use the chat to drop in already where you're from, what you're struggling with, where your challenges are as we do our intros and then get into all of this. With that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Elizabeth and let her introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Really excited to be a part of the panel today. My name is Elizabeth Diley. I lead campus recruiting at General Mills. We have a program, and I think it's really important to kind of talk about the size of my program too, just so maybe you can see yourself in what we do, or just think about scale. We recruit about 150 interns and about 150 full-time folks off of campus. Our big strategy is that intern to full-time conversion as we think about early career talent. We also recruit across 11 different functions. So that ranges all the way from MBAs to PhDs, liberal arts majors, engineers, all of those things to help make food the world loves. And you can see the brands behind me. You know, we have some really, really great brands, from iconic cereals to Betty Crocker Peak Mixes to Yoplait yogurt. So I have been with the company for 14 years, so have been in the food industry and campus recruiting and early career talent for that time. Really love my role, and again, have had such great even intros with the panelists, so I'm really excited to continue to learn from them, but I know for those on the call, you're going to learn a lot from the other folks here too.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Paul, passing it over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone, Paul Bauer here. I'm excited to be here with the rest of the folks. So I got into early careers, I guess I started in career centers at universities and did that for a few years, and then I've been around from Northwestern Mutual to Amazon, Expedia, Salesforce, and then most recently GoPuff, which I know time for a little bit of a downer, but I was part of a mass layoff a couple of weeks ago. So I'm trying to enjoy that time off, but during my time in early careers, I've done anything similar to Elizabeth, from PhD data scientists to MBA programs to undergrad. And so I've been part of organizations that are recruiting 30 people to upwards of 2,500. Seen a little bit of a lot of things, and so excited to be here with y'all today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I want to start off in just our conversation today in really defining what it actually means to think about the candidate experience for early careers. And I know that that is different across the board, and it probably differentiates even with those on the line too, in terms of where that starts and where that ends. I actually want to start with you, Elizabeth, and thinking and just have you share, where does that journey actually start for you, and what do you consider the actual early career kind of start and stop of an experience?
Yeah, you know, it's crazy how much you can think about this space and these people that are in this space. But really, for me, I think about the moment that you can start to engage with somebody. So, you know, that could be freshman, sophomore year on campus, right? And for some of us, it could even be in our high school programs that we're a part of, if we're part of that in the community. And so that experience of when a candidate first thinks about General Mills or thinks about the company is what I would say is this first part of the journey, all the way up until, you know, day one, until onboarding. And then you can even almost say that it goes beyond that if they're going into a rotational program or a leadership program during those first, you know, 0 to 3 years with your company. And so for me, I do think about it from like day one, when is the first like thought of somebody saying, I could have a career at this company, to when they actually graduate or go into more of a mid-level position within your company. And within those, there are the career fairs, there's the interviews, there's the application process, there's the interview process. All of those things I think fit into that candidate experience of how somebody's going to leave, either with a job or maybe not with a job, but how they're going to feel about your company and how you treated them through it.
Yeah, and you shared something right before we got on this call that I think is really important too. You know, there's so much that individuals are exposed to, especially when you think about this early career of talent, that is aligned to your brand. They don't know who you are as an employer, but they certainly have an impression of how they see your brand in the marketplace, or maybe how they are unaware of your brand altogether. So I think pulling those things together is really key as you tell that story. Paul, curious for you, you know, in your experience too, how have you defined where this journey kind of stops and starts and ends?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to Elizabeth. So the moment you meet someone that has the potential to hire you is the moment that a career journey starts. And so when you think about that from the perspective of early careers, that is, to Elizabeth's point, sometimes in high school. Not that I want to encourage high school students to be thinking about the rest of their career. They've got a lot of time for that. But I really do think it starts like your first, second, third year of undergrad. Like that's when they should be starting their relationships with the career centers. And then they do become champions in the company. So if they're getting that internship, they convert to full-time. Really their engagement with the early careers team or university recruiting team doesn't really stop. And so that contributes to future hiring, but also their own retention of the company. But when I think about it from just like what my teams have been focused on, it is typically from that junior year, maybe in an MBA or PhD program, but from when we start recruiting through the time they get to onboarding is probably where my team spend most of their energy focusing.
And I would add one thing, Kimberly, that I've heard actually it's even more important, I think, to think about it from companies who aren't consumer facing or a consumer brand that you eat Honey Nut Cheerios every single day, but maybe you're a B2B SaaS company that sits behind the technology that people use every day, but students don't know. And so for those types of brands as well, I think that it's even more important to really, really emphasize that early engagement, as both of Paul and Elizabeth mentioned, because if you go into a sophomore or junior and they see your company, they may not know who you are if your company just sells to other companies versus sells into a product in their home.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, especially when you think about engagement. And I read a recent study that was just talking about Gen Z 18 to 24-year-olds and just their overall behavior and what does that look like. And the data that was shared said that on average, candidates who are under 25 actually spend 7 to 11% longer on career sites than older age groups, which is really telling, because I think in a lot of ways we oftentimes think, oh, they're just doing all these other things and they're, applying all over the place, or they're not experienced the brand. But the data and the study found that no, they're actually doing that. They're just not telling you, and they're exposed and experiencing the brand in their own way. And so they're still doing that research. They're still exploring, they're still identifying with who you are. You just don't know where and when. And so it's important to kind of have that always on experience for that individual, which actually leads me to my next question. And Paul, I'll start with you on this one. What do you think of when you think of the different components of the experience for an early career individual? Are there pieces that stand out that are more important than the others? Are there ones that in your experience have allowed you to win faster with that level of talent too?
Yeah, so when I think about just different components and stuff that I prioritize, I think for me, it's about the long game. So early career is a really interesting point in someone's career life, because even if the candidate doesn't end up working with you or that company right then, they're still likely going to be a candidate at some point in the next 30, 40 years of their career. So you are making a really deep impression. So something that I like to do, especially like most recently at GoPuff, which was a startup, and so we didn't have the same name recognition as other companies that I'd been to or as like General Mills. I would try to let the company be the backdrop and offer something that was really functionally helpful at the beginning. So whether like at career fairs, I would stop students walking by and say, hey, go talk to 5 companies you don't care about first, and then save the companies you care about most for the end. And then they're going to come back and talk to me, because they're gonna be like, oh, it worked. Like I got my nervous jitters out with those first companies. Or maybe you offer a resume workshop. And so you're giving functional skills that are actually helpful regardless of the company. And then the company is the backdrop. So they keep coming back to you because you were actually helpful. And so I think that's important. And then second, I would just hit on diversity. I think it's important that people see either people that they can identify with or that they don't identify with. I think both are important depending on the perspective. And I think that will give a candidate a lens or perspective of, yeah, that's the company that I could be interested in, or like, I can't see myself there. So that's how I think about it. And then of course you need to execute the rest of it well, then you have a good candidate experience. But I think if you don't get it from the attraction, then they won't have a candidate experience to matter.
Yeah, I really like what you said there about that kind of like upfront. What's that initial touch point that you, the brand, the company are giving out? Elizabeth, curious, what do you have to add? How is that different from some of the things you've done in the past?
Yeah, I think, as we think about early career talent, and Paul hit on this, like these could be consumers or people that that will be a part of your life cycle in a company for their life as well. And I'm lucky to work for a company that has a tangible product that people can see on the shelf. And I do see myself as an extension not only of the talent acquisition team, but an extension of talent management and an extension of even our sales force. We are not only finding talent, but we're also driving people to the shelves to remember our products in a good way. And so that first impression with my team is going to go a long way in the life cycle of somebody from 18 to 24 years old. They're always going to be touching my brands and my products from my company. And so as we think about interacting, part of our job, I think also in college recruiting is helping those students, and Paul alluded to this, of like resume reviews, helping students figure out what it is that they want to do. Every student that I touch and talk to, I hope that they're taking something from me and being able to use it, if it's with GoPuff or if it's with another company, and bettering themselves and thinking through their own career choices. And so the candidate experience is not just for me interviewing and assessing them, but also helping them think through what is going to be the next 20, 30, 40 years of my life. And I take that really seriously. And I think everybody in campus TA should, because we are shaping and helping that next generation of the workforce that's going to change the way we work. Everybody on the call, these students are going to change the way we work, the way we think, the way we innovate. And that's really important for them to leave feeling really great about the company, even if it's a no, or maybe not now, making sure they leave feeling really good about it. So I think that first impression, and even telling somebody, no, you're not the right fit, or no, not right now, is going to be one of the most impactful time of telling somebody about, or of a candidate experience, of how they're leaving feeling about your company.
Yeah, I love that. I know that both of you are very passionate about just how someone feels in the process or in the experience, which I think is so spot on and so important for this next generation as well of talent that we're seeing kind of come up. I'm curious, how do you and this might be a curveball from some of the things we talked about even prior, but it just came to me. So hopefully you're okay with that. How do you work with, within the company to really build the experience that you want that individual to have? And what I mean by that, and just circling back to what both of you guys said, there were things you hit on about diversity and, knowing that you need to represent that, but also you're just one piece of the pie. You are one piece of the funnel for that experience or for that talent that's up and coming. How do you work with other, pieces of the company, whether that's departments or other individuals? Where do you bring them into your conversations, and how you found, effective strategies for winning in that area?
Elizabeth, you want to go first?
Yeah, do you want to go first, Paul?
I can, sure. So I think about that again, most recently at GoPuff, because they'd never had an early careers program. So we really did have to start building that experience across the company when many people didn't have that exposure. Like getting champions in the business was a little challenging, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a couple things to do. Ideally, you find those champions at different levels within the business, and that can be helpful. Maybe people that went through internship programs. The other thing that is maybe less exciting, but equally important, is when you have a bad experience, maybe the candidate experience suffered, or whatever that case was, it wasn't ideal. I think those are really good learning opportunities. And so having that conversation with that manager, with that executive, to just share the importance of early careers. I mean, I'm sure most people here know this, but interns who convert to full-time had the highest retention of any employee statistically at a company. Elizabeth might win out there, but so when we tell them that, and it's also where we can change the needle on diversity, I think that using those stats is going to be really important, especially with senior level leaders who maybe don't get it, maybe think that this is something that we do that feels good. Something that I would say frequently is like the feel good element of what we do is a side effect of the early careers program. Like it's important and exciting, and it feels good to help people get their first job and stuff. But our intention is we want to increase the retention and increase the diversity of our organization. And so when I can lead with those statistics, I think that's been really helpful in creating the culture, at least getting the recognition from leaders across the company that it needs to have. Elizabeth, what else would you add? Like, how would you add on to that?
I think campus TA teams and early career teams really are the eyes and ears on campus and what is coming up in the next generation of the workforce. And so it is imperative that we communicate to our talent management folks, to the people staffing, to our business leaders about what's happening in the 4 years or in what's happening in B school right now. It is our job. And I think that is something we all as TA leaders need to do, is to inform our businesses of what's coming up, what our curriculum's looking like, what are students wanting when they graduate. And that could go to benefits, to compensation, to, you know, just your overall workplace and like how you're working and how you're communicating. Those are things that are going to be really vital to any company's success. And any shareholder is going to want to know that information too, or have the business know that information. And so I think, you know, that is really important for the people on campus talent acquisition to be that eyes and ears. I think, you know, college students are the biggest pool of talent that you have. Like, you think about this, every year, millions of students are graduating. You think about the recs that are open on like external hiring and things like that. You may have just a small group of people that may fit that skill set or that competency. You think about students, you have literally anybody in the country that could work in your positions, from really great schools, from really, you know, getting really great degrees, fresh thinking, all of that. And that's something that I think we also need to educate our business partners to the point of getting diversity of thought, all of that. We have a huge pool to do that in college recruiting, and an enthusiastic group of folks too that are really excited to work for the companies.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And it makes me, you know, something I think we were talking about earlier previous to today's conversation was just looping and having that constant feedback loop between different organizations within the company, especially as you're looking at how do we change our workforce? How do we bring and build in a more diverse workforce? How do we retain that talent? And you all are really at the front lines of that. You understand what and where and when and how to shift that. And I think it was you, Elizabeth, that shared with me more of an anecdotal story of, look, at a certain point, we've had these conversations around benefits, comp, mental health with individuals. And we've actually used that feedback to change the way that we actually look at how we define our experience and how we talk to this talent. Do you mind sharing just a couple, maybe even one time where maybe you got feedback from that talent and then you did shift and quickly kind of pivot in how you either attract or speak to the individual talent coming through?
Yeah, I think, you know, we talk a lot about interviewing and assessment and like making sure that people are feeling comfortable in that space too. And like, I mean, it's as easy as looking at your job descriptions and making sure that you're using gender neutral pronouns and making sure that you're not using, you know, outdated language as well, and speaking to the way that we should be all speaking to one another now. And that's an easy look, and just saying, hey, let's review our job descriptions. What do they sound like? What if I identify this way and I'm reading this? How does that make me feel? And, you know, even as we think about like gender neutral bathrooms, that was something that was was not a part of general. 5 years ago, I don't know if we had gender neutral bathrooms. And so I don't know if a candidate, if they had asked for an accommodation, if I could have actually done that for them. And like now we have them throughout the building. And like I feel so much better about that as we think about accommodating different types of candidates and that a candidate experience. And then it goes to the interview panel too. And this is, we did get feedback from a student that felt that she didn't see herself in the interview panel. And we gave her a job offer, and she was very upfront with me of why she declined that job offer, because she didn't see herself in the people that were assessing her and the people that were having conversations with us. And, that was like a really good moment for me to be like, wow, what are we doing here? We can easily change this. We need to make sure people feel comfortable and that they see that they could see themselves here, and that they, that we control that as TA of making sure people feel comfortable coming to our space. Interviews should not be scary. It is a two-way conversation. Too many companies think it's a one-way conversation, and it's not. And especially in this job market, recruiters are mostly selling versus assessing right now. Like that is like, and we cannot forget that. And I think for anybody on the call thinking you have the power as a recruiter, you don't anymore. Like it is, and even with students, like we just need to be really mindful of showcasing ourselves and making sure they feel comfortable in the assessment process and interview process as well, and respected.
I love that. I think that's so spot on. Paul, did it look like you were going to add something?
Yeah.
Anything to add? I don't want to move
No,
on, but
right.
I definitely want to hear from you. It looked like you had something.
Yeah, I do. It'd be awkward if I didn't. No, one of the things, so kind of to Elizabeth's point, that we are carrying the students through this process, and like they're advocates and selling to them. We got feedback, I think this was at Expedia, we got feedback in one of our surveys that the student didn't feel prepared for the interview. They didn't necessarily know what to expect. And we'd sent out like, here are the 3 interviews you're gonna have. This one's technical, this one's behavioral, like we'd done that. But from that feedback, what we decided to do is instead, we then hosted twice a week live interview prep sessions for anyone interviewing for any of our roles. And so walking them through the STAR method, walking them through a little bit about Expedia. And I've done that at the rest of the companies that I've gone to also, but we are wrong if we think that all the students know how to leverage their career center, or they've got a mentor that's worked in a profession like this before and they know how to interview like this. Like that's not correct. And so to Elizabeth's point, that it's a two-way street, we have to help prepare them. The more confident they feel in the interview process, the better they'll do, and then we can assess them properly. Otherwise, we're just assessing their nerves, and that, mostly people's jobs aren't to interview all day, but mostly we assess people based on how they interview. So it is a weird dichotomy where what we're assessing isn't actually what they're doing all day. So if we can help prepare them for it and make them feel more confident and share more relevant information, then we can do our jobs better.
Yeah, I love that. It actually, I was going to ask you guys like what things to avoid, in building this experience. And it feels like that's one of them. Like, don't go in with this assumption that they'll know or be prepared with what to say or how to respond, because that confidence just either one isn't there, or they're just not exposed enough to what to expect within those conversations or that dialogue. So think about building around that. So that's a good golden nugget too, I think, for the group. Go ahead, Paul.
And yeah, something if I can add there, we actually saw the number of candidates we need to interview to offer decrease because candidates were more confident and able to share their stories better. So we were able to assess candidates better because we were preparing them better. Like what you're going to talk about shouldn't be a secret in an interview. At least that's my perspective. And so it did actually help the business move faster as well. So it was a really good thing that we ended up doing.
I love that. I love that. And if anybody else has, again, drop in the chat too, if you are seeing things that are working, like this is intended for us to share and learn together, or even challenges. Where are you getting stuck in the process of, getting and keeping people engaged as well?
And Kimberly, do you want to hold questions to the end, or do you want to answer them as we kind of go along?
Let's do a couple more. I have like one more kind of big question I want to ask these two. And Perfect. Then let's move on to questions. I'd love to do that. So the next one, I think more or less like puts a bow on how you display and really articulate what success is. And so I want to talk about metrics, which is always something that comes up when we're thinking about how do we show, and sometimes it's not quantifiable. So that's okay too. But I'm curious for both of you who have been at different stages of companies, both big and very small as well. What are some, either best practice metrics and or things that you've found are the most important when you're tracking, engaging the success of your efforts? What top things come to mind, both big and small? Let's start with Elizabeth.
I think one of the biggest things that is a metric that I just really think is really important. So I alluded to this earlier. Our internship program is our biggest filler into our full-time positions. We don't do a ton of full-time recruiting because most of our interns do convert over. Over the past couple of years, we've been upward to 86% of our interns accepting their full-time offers after internship. And in 2020, it was 95% of our interns that got offers.
Wow.
NACE says, I think like 55% is great. And so like, I just feel really, really great about that number. That goes to me showcasing how we're developing our internship program, how students are feeling in the 10 weeks. So talk about candidate experience again. Interns are candidates during their internship. Like they are interviewing for a full-time job for 10 weeks. And that experience of how you structure your internship program, how inclusive it is, how much, learning and development, real-time projects, all of that stuff goes into that candidate experience. And so that's a metric I find really, really important. Also, at the end of the internship, we survey all the interns asking if they would recommend General Mills as a place to intern. And we send that out to everybody, even if they don't receive a full-time offer with General Mills as well. And 100% of those interns said that they would recommend General Mills to a colleague at school. So again, that just to me makes me feel really great that my team is putting together something that is being impactful for them. And that is also good. They're going to go all out to campus talking about their experience, even if they didn't get an offer with us. And I think, again, that just continues to build the reputation of the program, what an internship should be for students. And like we think about unpaid internships and some of these internships that aren't really fruitful for the student. And I would just encourage everyone on the call to take a hard look at what your internship program is, what your results are from that, and also like what is your overarching, like why do we do an internship, to make sure it fits with your mission and with your company's mission too.
Yeah, I am interviewing a lot right now, just as I am looking for a job, and I'm asking people that question. And it's really interesting to get the answers back of like, oh, it feels good, and our founders went to this school, so that's how it started. It's like, okay, thank you for your time. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question to ask yourself, but also to ask when you're interviewing. So metrics, what's important? So a lot. I love numbers and data, but I've only seen a couple of companies do this well. But if you're able to, again, I mentioned interns who convert to full-time have the longest retention of employees. If you're able to track that, they also get promoted faster. And again, just stay with the company longer. So if you're able to track that metric, which is really hard to do, that is ideal, because then you can actually show like the full value of your program to senior leaders. But from maybe more the process, one of the things that I've started doing, and I feel like maybe a broken record, but it comes back to diversity. So after the rec, I've seen companies do it different ways. So you need to figure out what works best with your company. But after the rec is closed, we were able to go back into the rec and get the identity information. So not tie it to any like name or candidate ID, but get the identity information for each step of the funnel. And so we're able to see, are we getting a lot of diversity at the top of the funnel, or are we just getting like 100 people and we're moving those 100 people through? So like, are you actually attracting a diverse set of people, or are you just moving students that identify as diverse through the process? So I think that's interesting. And then it also shows you if you have any bias through the process. And so those numbers are ones that I look at. And then of course, like, the numbers you shared, conversions are excellent. And so like that, of course, you need to look at that as well, and all of it. But I like to look at how long are they staying with the company, how many promotions are they having, and then also what's the diversity of the funnel all the way through it. To look at, are we attracting the right people, and then what's the bias through the process.
One number I'm not very interested in, Kimberly, I would say, is a lot of people talk about like offer to acceptance rate. And honestly, I don't ask my team, we don't look at that very often for my team, because I think then all of a sudden you're not getting, like, if you have a chance with a student, you should give them an offer. Like, I feel like some companies don't give offers because they're worried about that offer to acceptance rate. And like, I just feel very much like if a student is like, maybe not 100% sure they want to come in and exploring different industries, we shouldn't hold that against a student. Like, we should give them the time, like we do everybody else, to really consider that. I also would say the time for acceptance, like students should use the whole time that's given to them if they need it, right? Of course, I want an offer to be accepted as soon as I give it. And like, I would love that as a recruiter. It would make me sleep better at night and have me way less stress. But like, if we're giving that time, it's because we want students to take that time and really think about it and not regret their decision later too.
Yeah, I think it also is a clear indicator that the company themselves really does care about you making the right choice and finding the right fit, versus just it being all about them and saying, hey, you didn't, we're not going to extend this offer, or it doesn't make sense, or whatever that might be. We need your response in 24 hours. That there's really this room for them to understand that the company themselves is going to live out that statement, that you have time to really build your career here and think about what you want to do, how you're going to get there, what that's going to look like. And we're also here to help you do that. Speaks volumes, even though you're not really saying it. So I really like that too. There's a lot of reading in between the lines that happens at this stage of early careers where people don't know. And so it's easy to make assumptions. And so sometimes you want to give that space. Other times you want it to be crystal clear and just over communicate. I think, as even Paul said, hey, this is exactly what we're going to ask you at the interview. Like, we want you to be so set up for success too, and understand that we're very transparent here as a company.
I think as well, Elizabeth, that offer extended period is a super interesting period. I think that a lot of companies have questions around. Best practices or tips on, you extend an offer, maybe you have 2 weeks, 4 weeks. What should that communication look like, if anything, from your team? So you're not pushing them, but also at the same time, like, is there anything you can do in that offer extended experience that candidate's having, where they're sitting there like, holy cow, I have an offer, what do I do? To, circling back, help them and prepare them to make the best decision for themselves? Anything that you all do?
Absolutely, Parker. Great question. And like, that is the moment that offer goes out, the power shifts, right? Like, to the student, like, they have the offer in hand. You are now like the person that you're hoping to get the great answer from. Like, they've got the great answer from you. Now it's shifted, right? Everything that you can do in those 2 weeks is going to be super important. So the first thing, obviously, sending congratulation notes. Anybody on the interview team should be saying, loved interviewing with you, loved hearing about your experience as the Walmart shift lead and how you brought that to life in the question about, leadership. Thank you for sharing your personal stories with me. Really hope you join General Mills. Here's my cell, here's my email if you have any other questions. If you have senior leaders that are really interested in campus recruiting, thankfully at General Mills, our senior leaders really get excited about new talent coming off of campus. Having them even pick up the phone for 5 minutes, and we know students don't answer their phone, so leaving a voicemail if their inbox is not full, right? Like, and so I mean, that's the challenge.
Always full.
Yes, and like text messages now, like, I never text message up until last season was the first time I was like, fine, I'll do it. And I got on there and text message. I was like, I should have done this a long time ago, but I was holding out. And so those are the interactions. The other thing that we do is, and I think is a really good best practice, is if they identify with a network or identify with an affinity group, ask them if they would like to connect with somebody that has similar background, maybe has made a move to Minneapolis or has made a move to Murfreesboro, where one of our plants are, connecting with other early career folks that have made decisions similar to the one that they are, alumni, those things, that all needs to happen within those 2 weeks. It's a lot of coordination. It's a lot. That's why we all stay up till 2 a.m. during campus. But like, those have to happen. And if they don't, you may lose your candidate. But those are all touch points, and you have to be strategic. You can't like the next day be like, here you go, and like throw it all out them. But like, we have email cadences about intern housing that goes out 4 days after an offer. We have an FAQ that goes out a couple days, like reminding them their offer date is coming up. Here are some FAQs you may be thinking about. Schedule a time with me to call. And so I think being really, really mindful about the information you're giving. I don't know about you, but as a recruiter, I can't get a candidate on the phone after I give an offer. And that has been really difficult for me. That's a change in the environment about people answering their phone. Also, students this past year and the year before have gotten 5 to 8 offers. I'm just one of the many girlfriends or boyfriends on the phone. And so that, like, getting through is really difficult. So finding strategic ways to do that and to meet the students where they are is really important.
Yeah, those are such good tips. I feel like there's so much here and there's so much more to even unpack. I'm like, where do I go? Because I want to get to questions, but I'm also like, I have more within here. Parker, why don't I shoot it over to you? If you want to I want to make sure we have time for questions, and then I'm happy to unpack all of what Elizabeth and Paul just shared too. But I want to get through some of the chat because I think there's some really good questions in here too.
Yeah, no, of course. So Kristen Reismeyer, I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong, but she says, how do you engage / keep warm those B candidates that you aren't ready yet to decline yet or move forward with for an offer? But a lot of times they felt left hanging for a while we continue to move through that recruiting season. Elizabeth or Paul, I'll kind of open it up to either of you.
Go ahead.
So when I'd recruit, or what I would tell my team to do is, during the interview process, we tell every candidate, like, especially as they're entering the final rounds, you will hear back from me between these 2 dates, and I will have 1 of 3 answers for you. Either I'm going to give you an offer, I'm going to tell you you're not getting an offer, or I'm going to let you know that we've extended an offer and we're on a wait list right now. I'm very direct with candidates. So they know those are 1 of the 3 options that they're going to hear before they interview. And so after the interview, I would call or email or whatever the communication that you've been doing is, and follow through on what you said you were going to do. Like, as we talked about, here are the 3 options. Here's the one that we're at right now with you. And then a lot of the stuff that Elizabeth shared with the students that have offers and what you're doing in the next 2 to 4 weeks, you still do with your B round candidates. So you should still thank them for their time. So when we do a debrief, anyone who's getting an offer or is a runner-up for an offer, we identify one of the interviewers in the room who's going to give them a call or a text or an email or whatever it is. So right there in the debrief, we know who's partnered with each candidate from that like business point perspective of reaching out. The other thing is the attraction events are still going on. So as you're recruiting into whatever month it is, you're still inviting these candidates waitlisted and people that have an offer either out or accepted to your event. So if it's March and it's Women's History Month, sure, you invite every single one of those people to your Women's History Month event, whether they've accepted, not accepted, have an offer, or still a candidate in process. So that attraction stuff doesn't ever actually end because you're still needing to hang on to like the renegs, or at least prevent renegs. And so, I've used Scholars, which helps with that, and like helps you have a platform to just schedule your communications. So that way you are communicating with people. But yeah, so that's what I've done with candidates who were maybe the runner-up. Yeah, I wonder what other suggestions or things Elizabeth was doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important group of students because as Paul alluded, you may need them. And especially in our economy and the way recruiting is going now is there are more renegs and that's happening. And you want to make sure, again, to the candidate experience, to making sure that these people will always be happy as consumers of your brand. It is really, really important. And I love Paul's suggestion of you treat them just like somebody that has an offer. I think I would like to hit something that I've been trying to do more at General Mills is thinking through those events that aren't company specific, but like the Women's Day events, MLK Day, we actually hosted a big breakfast and we invited everybody to that as well. And so anything that you can do to include somebody in your culture, especially even a B candidate, that is really important. Even if it's a newsletter, and maybe they don't read it, but they see that General Mills put something in their inbox, right? And we talked about our new cereal to them. It just makes people feel a little bit more loved and more personalized in the process.
Yeah, I think there's something there in the small impressions and some of the things that I wanted or I'm hopeful that people got out of this conversation here is there's little things you can do that are just small steps that actually do leave a lasting impression. So even something as simple as a newsletter that's talking about, the touch points or thinking about even, one of the ideas I had as you guys were both sharing and Parker too, is just look like maybe it is as simple as a auto triggered monthly email that gets put into the queue, which for every new person that comes into the system, they're getting that touch and it goes to everybody or it goes to a certain subset where they're maybe getting more of the skills-based information or the company news, things like that, that just, again, serving up those impressions and those reminders of how much they're appreciated from the company.
Gotcha. Awesome. And then we have a few questions coming in, so I want to make sure we get to everyone. Weston Smart from Siva Logistics. Paul, when we were talking about those interview prep sessions, did the TA team control those interview prep sessions or were managers controlling those?
Yep. So we would have managers talk maybe once a month, a round table on what they look for in interviews, but the ones that we would do twice a week, that was done by the recruiters. So they would just essentially rotate on who was doing what, because sometimes they would target it to a specific role or something I think I don't know if I froze for y'all, but it was a good face. Sometimes they would do specific ones on PhD data science, but generally it was an overview of how to interview. And so the recruiters on a team would just take turns doing that. We also had a recorded one in case people weren't able to make that session.
Gotcha.
Another good audience that can help is the early career talent in your rotational programs too. They love being a part of that. And so it might be hard to get managers, and we all know managers are very busy, but people with 0 to 3 years experience love doing this stuff for us.
And even just on that, at the end of the internship, so in the last 2 weeks, we would host conversion panels with interns that had previously converted and the current group of interns, and no one from my team would be in the room. It was all moderated and done. Oh wow, I keep freezing.
We got you.
Okay.
Awesome. Cool. Another question from Megan Marley at Career Fairs. What material have you provided the participants that you feel captures their attention and keeps your company top of mind? Ultimately, the goal being they apply later.
I
don't know if I have anything.
I get to give out all this stuff behind me. So I feel really fortunate that we are a marketing branding company. And so a lot of the things that we do are fun and exciting, and I am a household name. So, but what I will say though, is it's hard in the virtual environment to sell General Mills. People see the big G, but if you go to a career fair and you see this stuff, you're like, oh, General Mills. And then you start talking to one of our recruiters and you're like, oh, you hire HR people, or you hire other people that don't make food. You hire data scientists and things like that. And so we are lucky that our brand kind of attracts people to come and talk to us a little bit more. And that we have the ability to give out free food that every college student really, really is excited about. But like, we're trying to be intentional about that too, like putting a QR code on the back of a Nature Valley granola bar, right? So like, they're taking our product, but they still have access to all of our jobs. We're trying to figure more creative ways out. You'll probably see on LinkedIn, we'll be sending our interns like baking kits and asking them to be more social about that. And that's a way for us to just generate excitement about General Mills and our brand.
Yeah, I mean, if the brand can do it, honestly, I don't feel like I have a huge, big win here, other than just if you can be helpful to them. If there's a way where you can be like functionally helpful, if it's a tip on how to approach the career fair, if it's where the bathrooms are, if you can be helpful to them, they'll remember you.
Awesome. We also just got another question from Alicia Love. She says, international students, they're unable to hire international candidates at this time. Advice on how to communicate with them positively through the process, knowing that they're unable to move forward with them. I don't know.
I think to Paul's point of being upfront about your process is really important. I mean, we talk to every student that stands in line or sits in our virtual queue, but it's really important, I think, to let them know why you can't hire, and also, if you can or if you can't right away. That is a question we asked everybody, is if they have the right to work. And it's not fair to anybody to not have that question right at the beginning of your screening process, and being upfront that, why you can't, because we also, a lot of the time is then spent on like, but I've got this and I'm able to do this. And then all of a sudden you're not even like assessing, and it feels like a fight, like right off the bat. And so also partnering with your career center so students know if you can or not upfront as you're going out to campus, if you are on site, is really important too. It's a tough one because there are so many international students and there's such great talent in that as well, that some students or some companies just don't have access.
Yeah, I agree. You have to be upfront with it. And unfortunately, you have to ask the question frequently as well, and continue to share that, your reasoning in that statement. I also just want to call out, in case we missed it, there is a question in the Q&A separate from the chat that I just noticed.
Cool. And we got people thank you everyone for joining, obviously, in there as well. I know Weston Smart, he had one more question from Seva Logistics. Elizabeth, to you about anything specifically. You talked about your internship program management being a really key part that relating towards your conversion and the metrics that you're tracking about your experience. Anything specifically about your program, whether it's one-on-one reviews, activities, etc., that you think has been really powerful in ultimately relating to that retention number?
Yeah, I would say we are very specific on our programming. So we spend almost all winter and now into the spring, like figuring out programming, from social events to interaction with leadership to development opportunities, and everything. Like, we have 11 different functions, from, like I mentioned before, from PhDs working in food to MBAs working in marketing to people coding and working in our data area. So like, all of our intern events are accessible to everybody, and it's very strategic of how we plan them. Also, getting our leaders involved to have touch points with the interns is very, very important. The performance, you mentioned this, performance reviews, really, really important as well. So we have very formal check-ins midsummer to let an intern know what they're doing and how they're doing. So we have calibrations and making sure everyone's on track and anything that they need to do to like rectify any sort of situation that's going on. And then at the end of the summer, interns leave with a very detailed performance appraisal as well. So you have to, I think the best programs are the ones that are really thinking about performance and giving feedback real time to students and in a formal fashion to let them know how they're doing, because some of these students, it's a new experience being in the corporate world. And so I think that's really important. And also, especially as you think about the like being inclusive, there are going to be students that have parents that work in corporate world that are helping them out through this. And there's going to be students that have never had anything like this before. And navigation of a huge corporate 500 company is really difficult for some students. I know I would have struggled as a junior in General Mills. Like, I'm glad I kind of came a little bit later in my career and got some cobwebs out. But like for some, it's just it's a big matrix organization trying to figure out. So I would say being really intentional and looking at your internship as a whole versus individual functions is going to be really important.
If I could add one thing that I've done. I know the question wasn't for me, but can I add something? So something that we did at, also at Expedia, our team owned the programming holistically, but we changed a little bit so that the stuff that Elizabeth was just talking about, like the learning series and the leading series and connections with former interns and things like that, like we own that. But then essentially we created like a student activities board. Think about what they have in college. So we had, I think it was like 12 students who varied from profiles they were in to start dates and end dates and everything. And essentially we gave them, I think it was like $30,000-$40,000 and said, what do you want to do with it? And so it was more engagement for them. And they had like, I was their advisor. So we didn't actually give them that money, but I was their advisor. And we said, what do you want to do? Like this summer's for you. So we let them plan the more like fun stuff and social stuff. And we made sure we focused on the like performance reviews, the FaceTime with senior leaders and executives, things like that. And so it got the students more involved and they did things that like students want to do instead of me, who's been out of college for 10 plus years trying to do it.
Very fair. No, I love that. And I know we have 2 minutes left and obviously want to thank everyone for taking the time today to join the conversation with myself. Obviously, I personally want to thank Kimberly, Paul, and Elizabeth for taking an hour out of your all's day to have this conversation. I've learned a lot. So thank you. And obviously, Kimberly, I'll kick it to you to kind of close us out.
Oh, thank you for inviting us. I think I'm speaking for the group in that, you know, we're all about building community here, and please connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you have follow-up questions, feel free to send them to Parker. We're happy to answer them. We certainly want to have a place where, you know, we can be thought-provoking, thinking about how to change and revolutionize some of this space, and also just share data on what's working and what's not. So again, appreciate you asking all of us to be part of this, Parker. It's been a great conversation, and special shout out to Paul and Elizabeth for your insights and just your experience here. You guys are the best, and you already know that I think that, but you guys really are the best.
Thank you all. This is great.
Yeah. Keep talking about it, honestly, for, I mean, ever, because I love this space. So
yeah,
there's so much more to come. So much more to come. Thank you, everyone, once again. We'll see you all next time, and make sure we invite you all to our next webinar. Have a great rest of your week. Start enjoying some spring weather, and thanks once again. All the best.
Bye, team.
Bye. Thank you.